So, Kyle, thank you for joining me on this episode of what I've started to do on the channel, which is bringing in people that have either had an influence on my own journey in web development or in on the industry as a whole for people who are learning web dev. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course. Now, you're somebody who I've started watching probably back in 2019, I want to say, when I kind of dabbled a little more seriously into web dev. I've started before, but my background is not even in computer science or tech at all. I kind of had this passion. And in the early days and years, I discovered your channel. And what I love about your content is that you're to the point from the start of the intro to the finish. It's just jam packed with value. There's no time to be wasted. And what I love is that you have this style of teaching or delivering your content through example. So it's just jumping into the code right off the bat and then seeing it in example. Now, that has been my journey, but I know a lot of my audience probably, or anyone who has been learning web development, has come across your content. But for the folks who don't know you or wish to know you better, why don't you just kickstart this with giving us a little introduction about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I can kind of start all the way back with when I first kind of got interested in the whole programming thing, because originally when I was going through like middle school, high school, I was always really good at like math and science, and people are like, "Oh, you should become an engineer. You should become an engineer." I'm like, "Okay, what's this engineering thing? Whatever." I looked it up. I was like, "Oh, mechanical engineering sounds really fun. I like building things with my hands. Like it's math, it's science, like it's all the things I'm good at. Let's do mechanical engineering." So when I applied for college, I applied as a mechanical engineer, and I was like, "Sweet, that's what I'm going to do." Then my senior year of high school, I actually moved to Delaware. So I moved like halfway across the country for my last year of high school. And they had this underwater robotics class, which I'm like, hey, I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. Robotics, like building things, that's what mechanical engineers do. I'm going to take that class. That sounds really cool and fun.
Yeah.
And so I took the class. And like I said, most of the class was like building out things, welding, screwing things together, whatever it is that we were doing. And then 1 week of the class, literally just 1 week, we did programming because we needed to be able to make the robot move. So we did a programming section for 1 week using a language that I think was called BASIC, but it wasn't like Visual Basic. It was literally like a hardware level kind of language that was supposed to be for people that have never programmed before. So super simple. And I absolutely loved it. I was like, holy crap, like I can write some things in my computer and then things happen in the real world. Like this robot is moving, like things are happening. It's really cool. So I immediately was like, wow, I really love this programming thing. And we were on a team of like 4 or 5 people in the class. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be the one that does the programming. Like you guys can do all the building stuff. I don't care about that anymore. This programming thing is awesome. I'm going to do that. So from that 1 week of class, I was like, okay, I love programming. I programmed maybe like 30 lines of code. Like that was all that this robot needed. It was like press button, go forward, press button, go backwards. Like it was super straightforward and simple, but I loved it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to change my major to be computer science or actually I changed it to computer engineering because I was still like, I'm an engineer because I do math and science. So I went to computer engineering, even though computer science would have been a better fit for what I actually enjoy. And immediately switched to computer engineering, went through the 4 years of college. And I realized when I was in college, the thing that I really enjoyed was web development, but they don't teach you web development in college. At least at my college, there was one class. It was like a 400 level class that was on Java with no framework. It was just using straight Java to build websites. And it was absolutely horrible because at the time I was doing an internship working in like ASP.NET. It was like Visual Basic, C#, that kind of stuff, building out websites. And there was some JavaScript in front end. And that was what I really enjoyed, like CSS, JavaScript, that kind of stuff. And then I went to this web development class, like, I'm going to learn so much. This is going to be great. And I was learning like Java. And I was like, I don't want to learn Java. That's not how websites are built. I mean, if I worked at a bank, maybe, but like nowadays, websites are not built using Java, like, oh, of course, some are, but it's just not the modern way of doing things. So I was like, this is not fun. There's no front end. Like, that's the stuff that I really enjoy. And while I was in school, the way that I learned web development was mostly through YouTube. Like I would watch tons of different videos. I mean, Traversy Media, I watched a lot of his content. Dev Tips used to be a really big channel back in the day. Even some of Kevin's videos, I would watch Kevin Powell. So like I watched all these videos to learn a lot of stuff about CSS, JavaScript. Like that was what I really enjoyed. And I ended up getting a job doing web development out of college, working at an agency. But I did mostly back-end work. I worked in Ruby on Rails, and there was some front-end work, some React, some JavaScript, some CSS, but it was probably 75% back-end, 25% front-end. And I really enjoyed the front-end side of things more. And I remember when I was watching these YouTube videos trying to figure out, okay, how do I learn this topic? How do I learn this topic? I would notice a lot of them were really, really long and drawn out, or they would cover like every aspect of something when really I only cared about like 10% of it. And I just thought to myself, I was like, man, I wish these videos were shorter or more concise or just quicker to get to the point. Like someone needs to do that. And I realized I was like, you know what? Maybe I can try doing that because I've always loved teaching. Like when I was in school, my friends would always come to me if they wanted to learn something. I'd always enjoy teaching them these different things. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to do it. And then I spent 2 years not at all doing YouTube after I had this idea because I was like, it's so much work to start. This is so difficult. I even bought a microphone, a really cheap one, and didn't use it for 2 straight years until finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to take the leap and do it. So it was about maybe a year after I started my first job. I was like, I'm going to start making YouTube videos. And then from there, everything just kind of exploded. I mean, it was really slow growth at the start, but I mean, obviously, I've gotten to where I am. This is a pretty long story, but essentially everything kind of stacked on top of each other until I got to this point. And really, it just took me looking at what existed and saying, I think I can do this better, and then trying to do it better. And it's not necessarily better like the other ways are bad, but for my learning style, and I think a lot of other people's learning style, having a quicker, faster paced approach can sometimes be helpful versus the more longer drawn out approach.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for sharing that. It's interesting. A lot of things you mentioned there. First of all, I didn't know you did mechanical engineering because that's what I studied back in the college, but I didn't have that robotics class to kind of pick my programming interest back in the day. So I stayed there. I finished that, but I had this passion like on the side. I would dabble into it. I would create stuff, whether it's like, you know, connecting computers in a local network or running. I remember back in the days, there was this accounting software that my dad's company was running on, and I was connecting this all together to run or building a small little applications here and there. Until later that I seriously got involved. And the more I learned, the more fascinating it became for me. And I was like, oh, I just wasted that 4 or 5 years of studying something else. I wish I had done this sooner. And interestingly enough, just like your journey, when I started learning, I started kind of documenting my own learning and then sharing them, putting them in blog posts. And I wanted it to create, videos on it, mainly for my own learning or referencing it back after I learned. Similar to you, I bought cameras or microphones without ever starting until I think it was either 2023 that I started or late 2022 that I put out the first video, and I started enjoying the process of learning something new, building, and then sharing it with someone else, just that one person that might learn the same way that I do. My style is a bit different than you. Sometimes I do dive into the concept first of abstract, understanding what it is, and then applying it to the code. But yours is just to the point, fast and furious, which I love and enjoy if you're quickly wanted to learn something. Now we talked about your web dev and your actually journey into starting your YouTube channel. How's the YouTube channel evolved? I know you've been creating content for the past 5 years. That's a long time. And I just looked at your channel today. You have about 680 videos. That's like 2-3 videos a week. And that's hard to keep up with, learning new technologies and building these videos while probably in the beginning you're just doing a full-time job. How are you keeping up with this?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, when I first started, there was no schedule or anything. I had the bright idea that I'm going to create a short, like mini course almost. That was going to be my very first set of videos teaching HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, like the most bare bones basic version. You can still find it on my channel. It's the very first videos I've ever produced. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to do that. And I'm actually really glad I decided to do that. It goes against like all YouTube advice out there, but I'm glad I did it because it kind of forced me to see it through to the end. Because if I didn't have like 10 videos that I had thought that I wanted to make in one series, I would have just stopped after like 4 or 5 because it's so difficult to make these videos. And I constantly was like, oh man, I really don't want to sit down for 8 hours to make this video, because back then it took me so long to make a video, getting everything set up, figuring out how editing worked. I did a lot of like animations and stuff that were way more complex than they needed to be. And it's just like so much time commitment. And so at the very beginning, it was really, really tough. And if I didn't have that commitment, I would have really struggled to actually even have a channel. I probably would have quit after like 4 or 5 videos. I think the thing that really helped me was twofold. One is in the process of making those videos, I decided to make a Git video. And it was like a 20-minute video on Git. It had tons of animations. It took me forever to make. I think I finished making the video at like 2 a.m. in the morning was when I finally finished editing it. And I'm like, I'm hitting publish and I'm going to sleep. I hit publish. I posted the video on Reddit. I went to sleep. And I woke up the next morning at like 10 a.m. or something, which nowadays I don't sleep in nearly that late, but I was up till 2 in the morning. So I woke up at like 10. I looked at my phone. I had tons of notifications on my phone. It like blew up on Reddit, that video did. It like went to the top of r/programming or whatever, like just absolutely exploded. It got like 9,000 views or something overnight in the span that I was sleeping. It was absolutely insane. And I ended up getting like 200 subscribers, which I was at like 12 before. So, I mean, absolutely skyrocketed my channel, which was a bit of a blessing and a curse because a lot of these people, there's no other content on my channel to watch. There's like 2 other videos. So like people would subscribe and then they never watched another video again after that, It gave me a lot of eyeballs, but it kind of gave me a fire, like lit a fire under me because I was like, oh, this is like something that can actually happen. Like if I make a really good, high quality video, people will watch it. And that video even had a massive mistake. It was the first video using this brand new microphone actually that I have. And I didn't realize that this microphone recorded only in one ear. So I'd had to switch it to mono when I edited, but I didn't know that because my headphones, as you can see, only have one earphone end on them. So I listened to the video in my headphones and I was like, it works just fine, not realizing it didn't come out of the other headphone. So I uploaded this video and like 75% of the video was only in one ear. So like I got absolutely flamed in the comments of this video for how terrible the audio was. But even with terrible audio, if the video content is good, people are still going to watch it. Like lots of people watched it and got tons of value from that. And the second kind of thing that I think really helped my channel was once I finished that series of like, I don't know, it was like 8 videos or something, maybe even less, maybe like 5 or 6 on like how to really get started with learning web development from absolutely nothing all the way to like a little bit of JavaScript. I posted that again on Reddit and that also did quite well and brought in a bunch of new people to my channel, started to get promoted a little bit on YouTube. And I think that kind of pushed me over like the 1,000 subscriber mark at that point. So like, I think that was about 6 or 7 months into the journey. I finally hit that 1,000 subscriber mark and I was like, okay, I'm feeling really confident. I actually bought this webcam that I'm using right now. When I hit that subscriber mark, I was like, I'm going serious. I've got this. This is going to be great. And yeah, from there, it just was like constantly grinding through. Like you mentioned, I probably have about 2 to 3 videos a week. And that for the longest time has been my commitment. Like around the time that I started to get to like the 1,000, 2,000 subscriber mark, I said, I'm going to make 2 videos a week every single week. And I stuck with that for about 4-ish years solid, didn't miss a single video. And then I decided to do extra work on course stuff over the last year. So I went down to 1 video a week. And that's kind of what I've been sticking at for the last year or so. I'm still considering whether or not I want to bump back up to 2 videos a week, just because with 1 video a week, I can spend more time on that video, put more quality and to do larger videos, for example.
So let me just pause on that. 2 to 3 videos a week for folks who haven't created videos, it's hard. Learning, keeping up with the new technologies, working a full-time job, and coming up with these videos, recording them, editing them, it's just a long process. So I admire you for that consistency of never missing a video in 4 years, putting out 2 videos. Now, I recently also bumped up my videos to 2 videos a week, which is hard because you have to just do twice as much as work as you're doing. And I have client projects and consultations on the side and everything else. So it's just, I admire the consistency that you have. And that speaks to the success that you have on the channel. You have 1.5 million subscribers. And as I mentioned, I don't think anyone who has dabbled into web development hasn't come across one of your videos, whether it's backend, where you would do in the older days more like Express.js, Node.js, MongoDB, the MERN stack, or front-end stuff as you're doing more so now. And I do want to mention the amazing courses that you have created in the past year or so, specifically on React. So why don't you talk about the courses and the process of creating those courses and the community that you have built around that and your feedback that you get from the people there. I know you have a full package course about React, simplified, and recently you have also published a course on NextJS. So walk us through that process as well.
Yeah. Real quick, before I jump into that, I do want to mention, you said, producing those 2 videos a week, being consistent, that is probably the biggest thing that contributed to my channel growth. So like if you're thinking about starting a channel, anyone out there, consistency is the most important, and don't get discouraged if a video does bad. Right now, my most viewed video of all time is a video that when I released it, did absolutely horribly. and stayed that way for like 6 months until it finally started to get traction and take off. And now it's my number one video and has been for years and years. And I made that video like 4 months after I started my channel, and it just sucked for like almost a year before it finally took off. But talking about course stuff, so I made my very first course, I believe it was in 2018. I decided to make a React course. And so that was back when hooks were kind of, they were not super new back then, but they were still relatively new. Like a lot of the courses on React were still on the class component way of doing things, and some of them were getting updated, but it was still kind of in that flux period. So I made a course on React, and I knew I had a full-time job at the time. I was still making 2 videos a week. Like there's no way I could make a big course. So my React course was like 4.5 hours long. It kind of went with my motto of like, be as simple and short as possible to teach you everything you need to know. And that course was like the bare bones of what you need to know to get started with React. It didn't cover anything advanced. It was just the bare bones stuff. And it took me forever to build that course. I didn't sell like a ton of copies of that course. I think I maybe sold like, I don't know, 50, 60 copies of the course or whatever at the start, like, which was amazing for me. I was like super stoked about that when it happened, but it was, not going to change my life or give me, a new job. I'm not going to quit my J job off of, like $1,000 or $2,000, whatever it was at the time. But I think it's really important if you want to do something like that, to create a course or whatever it is, to really just like sit down and plan it out. Because for me, this part that took the longest about my React course was not recording it, not editing. Those things take time, but the hard part is planning it out. Because if you want to teach someone something, you not only need to know all the things you're going to teach, but you also need to know all the things you're not going to teach, because React is huge. You could teach a million things in React, and I was making a 4 or 5 hour long course. Obviously, I can't teach everything in that course. So the hard part was planning, okay, what do I want to teach? What order do I want to teach it in? And then how can I remove all the stuff that's not super important? Because there's a lot of really niche things that you don't necessarily need to know in order to learn React. Like you don't need to know deep down how the React virtual DOM is comparing things to actually do its diffing and performance gains. But you need to know that there is a virtual DOM. So like that kind of step is really important. And I think kind of how you mentioned your start on YouTube was you essentially was like learning topics, and then you wanted to make videos on them to help you learn them better and help other people learn. So if anyone's out there trying to learn something, the best way to learn it is to learn it as if you're going to teach it to someone, because that not only forces you to figure out what the thing is, but also makes you figure out what is the important stuff and what's the not important stuff, which is the best thing for actually learning, like figuring out what is important and what is not important, so you can focus on the important stuff and kind of just leave the not important stuff until you actually need to learn it later. Maybe you have a specific use case for it.
I love it, Matt. I love how similar our way of thinking is. In that sentence you mentioned, the best way to learn is to try to teach it to somebody else. That's has always been the way that I learned, even back in middle school. Whenever I'm coming across something new that I'm learning, I'm trying to understand it from different aspects, but also kind of condensing it in a way that I can deliver it to somebody else, and that has always made me learn it better. And I love that you have the same approach, and it's probably why I love your content and have enjoyed it a lot. Now, you mentioned React from back in 2018, where I think the hooks either weren't introduced or were just introduced, maybe in 2017 or 2019. I don't remember, but React has gone through some major changes recently. I want to get your take on where we are in React. I know you have covered a lot of new concepts on your channel as well, but we have gone from a client-side library to now a kind of a full stack library where you can render React components on the server, fetch data on the server, and you're not using as many hooks now as you were before. So what is your take on the new changes that React has made in React 18, and also what's coming up in the 19 by the end of 2024, and these new frameworks that are now working around the new concepts in React?
Yeah, in order to really talk about this, I almost need to go back to the class components way of React, because that's how I started learning React. And it was all right, but dealing with state and like effects were really hard in the class component way of doing things. It just wasn't clean or well-written code. Then you move over to hooks, and hooks really blew a lot of people's mind, mine included, because I was like, wow, state is so much easier. Effects, which is the main thing, that was so much easier using hooks. But the problems hooks started to introduce was it became kind of complicated to really reason what was going on. Making sure your use effects only ran at the right times was a little tricky. Dealing with like memos and callbacks for all the different performance gains, those were things that became, I think, quite difficult inside of React. Just dealing with state management and life cycles, that became easier with hooks, but also added its own level of complication because now you need to think in this hook related way that was different than anything else before. Now we fast forward to the more modern way of doing React where we have server components, server actions, and I think this is a huge, really good step forward. Essentially, React and a lot of people in general just realized doing everything on the client is not super realistic. I mean, sure, you can, but then you run into all those problems, like I said, with state management, life cycles, all that kind of stuff. So if we then move back essentially to how applications have been built for the last couple of decades to doing a lot of things on the server and then only doing a small amount of work on the client, that alleviated us from actually having to use very many hooks. I know when I write modern code using these modern React features, usually in Next.js, because that's kind of the only framework right now that has all these features, I noticed that the amount of hooks that I write in my React code is almost zero. I mean, I might write a use effect or a use state that is used for like 2 lines of code just to do something really simple. Like in a form, I just want to update a value or whatever. Really simple stuff. But 99% of my state management and use effect kind of lifecycle code is all just on the server and then gets passed down to the client and then rendered out. So the lifecycle and the thought process is much simpler because instead of having all your code on the client constantly running all the time, you have, okay, my code ran on the server and now that code's getting passed down to the client and you can kind of ignore everything that happened on the server because it already happened in the past. Nothing else on the client will affect that, if that makes sense. And then as we move even further forward into like React 19, I think the big change with React 19 is they're adding in a compiler step into React. So essentially what that means is React used to just be you write your React code, it gets pushed down to your actual JavaScript, and it just works just like that. But now they're going from your React code, they're compiling it down to JavaScript, and they're actually changing certain things about your React code. And the main thing that they're changing is they're making it so that all of your different callbacks, like use callback, use memo, you no longer really need to use that because React is able to look at your code and go, okay, this thing only updates when value X and Y changes. So I'm not going to update this unless value X or Y changes. So it took away the hardest part of hooks in like when we have Next.js and server components, that got rid of like use state and use effect. And now with this new way of doing things with the compiler, we got rid of use callback and use memo. So really we took the hardest part about hooks and completely removed them while still keeping all the benefits of making sure state management and lifecycle methods are a lot easier to reason with. So I think if anything, React is in the best place that it's been. A lot of people are always saying, oh, React is dead. New framework X is going to take over React. But I feel like React is in so many different companies. It's ingrained in the web development ecosystem, and they're constantly improving it with what I consider to be relatively large and good changes while still keeping around all the old stuff so companies don't have to just abandon everything to go over to the new way of doing things. So I think right now React is pretty much in the best state it's been.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of things you mentioned about the kind of evolution React has over the years from moving from a client-side library to now being full stack or kind of going back to the way that we used to render web applications. And now with these new introductions and with the compiler that you mentioned, that's just optimizing your React code without you as a developer having to worry about like memoizing your functions or preventing a component from re-rendering unnecessarily. It's just making the developer's job easier while also delivering a better user experience because now your app is more performant. So it's best of kind of both worlds. And I think it's headed in the right direction. And I agree that we get a lot of pushback from the community because mainly they have been used to building React applications in a certain way. And now they need to learn a new mental model and the concept of building React apps. And these new changes have changed a lot. So it's it kind of if your knowledge of previous way of doing React may not be 100% applicable or transferable here, but once you start coding in this new way, I know I personally don't want to go back to the previous way of writing React codes. It's just so much more intuitive to write components that can co-locate their data fetching logic inside of them, run on the server. You don't have half of the need or 80% of the need for global state management that you needed on the client because now everything can live either in the URL state or back in the server. So a lot has changed, but I think once you start building real applications with it, you would appreciate it more and you would just get over the hurdle of just learning the new way of doing things. And from that point on, there's no point going back.
Yeah, I think some important advice for people is like when Next.js first kind of announced these new changes along with React for like server components and the app router and all that, a lot of people immediately flock to it. They're like, oh, this is super cool. I'm going to try this out. But I would recommend if you're kind of someone that doesn't really like all these really fast changes that are happening, don't adopt something right away when it's released. Give it a few months, maybe even a year, depending on how long the feature needs to cook. But that'll give not only the feature time to become even more stable and foolproof, but also it gives time for people to figure out what are the best practices and the ways to use this. And also, how does this compare to the old way of doing things? Because if you're the first one in there, like generally me and you probably are because we teach these things, you run into a lot of problems. There's tons of bugs. You don't really have super good documentation. There's no videos out there explaining things to you. So if you give it a few months, maybe 3-4 months, whatever it needs to be, depending on how big this feature is, you can not only get past all those buggy features, you don't have to worry about them, but you also have like some set videos, standards, and documentations on like what are the actual best ways to use this thing. Because at the beginning, people are just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. After the time flies a little bit, you kind of see, okay, these are the things people are actually using this for, and these are the ways I can use it in my project. And I think it'll make that actual pain point of swapping from something older to something newer a little bit less if you just don't jump to it right away.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right in that in the beginning, these new features didn't even have enough resource or documentation even for you to dive into. So you'd just be testing and trying. And a lot of frustration may have come from the fact that there wasn't enough resources or documentation, or it was still buggy or in development before it went stable. But that, I think that's also the new way that React team and Next.js using this Canary version of React has. It's a different approach where before they would just only release a new feature once it was stable. So like hooks, they came out once they have already tried it and it was stable and it was introduced and everybody can now adapt it. Whereas now they just bring in these new features into the Canary kind of version or channel where you can just test and try until they become stable. So you get the chance to test them and try them and learn them and also provide feedback. But as you mentioned, it's not for somebody to just jump in and migrate all of the previous code to the new one, because you're guaranteed to face some frustrations, some bugs, sometimes the API changes. So I like that I get the chance to try new stuff before they become all of a sudden a new way of doing React. But it can also be frustrating if you are somebody new that wants to learn React. I can understand in the beginning, back in the days, people would just keep asking me, do we do Next.js 12 now? Do we do Pages router, or should I just migrate or learn the app router? If I go app router, it's just unstable, it's buggy, I'm just going to get frustrated. If I do Pages router, I know eventually I have to shift. So it was just like a middle point where nobody knew what to do until it became stable and there's more content around it now. There's tested and proof that this works. Now more people are adapting way easier. Now the type of questions that I get now is not anymore whether I should use React hooks or server components, whether I should use Pages router or the app router. It's just, how would I do this in the app router?
Yeah, and I think an important thing for people to realize is that places like YouTube, Twitter, and other social medias, they're always on like the furthest edge of the bleeding edge of technology. Like it's always the newest, greatest thing that they're talking about because that's what gets clicks on videos. That's what gets views on Twitter. I mean, that's what people do because that's what people want to learn about. But when it comes to actual companies that you're working in, most of them are going to be at least a year behind, and depending on the size of the company, many years behind whatever the bleeding edge of technology is. I guarantee you there's probably more companies still using the Pages way of doing things in Next.js than there are companies using the app way of doing things, just because companies can't spend, months rewriting their entire application to every new update of a feature until it becomes to the point where it's actually cost effective for them. So even if you right now you learned the Pages way of doing things in Next.js and now you're like, oh, I'm so far behind, everybody's using this new app way of doing things, I guarantee you most companies you apply for probably still have some code using the Pages way of doing things. And if you know that Pages way of doing things already, transferring over to the new app router way of doing things, while yes, there is a learning curve, it's much smaller than trying to learn everything from scratch. So don't worry about trying to stay up to date with the latest, greatest of everything. As long as you're keeping your pulse on what's actually changing and learning the things that you want to learn as they come available, that's really more important.
Exactly. I love that. I love that point. While Next.js or the app router is still in its infancy, where most of the applications that I come around is just still pages router. Most of the companies, as you mentioned, they're not just going to change their way of coding or their code base overnight. It's good to have an eye while this app router or the new way of React applications is cooking on the side, while you're still building even applications in the pages router or migrating or working in a company that's like that. So I think that's the best advice. We kind of mentioned uh, about how would somebody start learning, or how React is still dominant in the front end kind of world. And we are biased because we work with React and our
Hmm.
content is that. But and I do know that you have a roadmap video on your channel as well. But for someone who wants to get started now, uh, getting into web development, or kind of deciding between all these different libraries that are out there, what is your recommendation for somebody who just wants to weigh out the options or get started on this web dev journey?
Yeah, I would say it depends a little bit where you are on your current journey. If you're absolutely know nothing about web development other than that's how websites are made, what you want to do is forget everything about libraries, frameworks, everything about React that everybody talks about, Next.js. Just completely forget those exist. You need to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that's going to be the core of your learning foundation. Because if you know all three of those, it doesn't matter what library or framework is like the cool flavor of the month. Transferring your skills from React or from JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to React, for example, is not that difficult. Sure, it is difficult, but it's much easier than learning JavaScript from scratch or HTML and CSS and so on. So start by those core fundamentals. Learn HTML, learn CSS, and learn JavaScript. You don't have to absolutely master these things, but learn them at the level where you can build out a decent project. Like if you can build out a to-do list, that's a great start. And then if you can build out a larger project, maybe something that takes you a week to build, or maybe even a couple weeks to build. If you're able to do that in just plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that's when I would say you are ready to move on to some of these other larger frameworks or meta frameworks and so on. Now, I would recommend learning React if you're going to choose a framework, just because there's more jobs for React than any other framework. It's probably the most stable framework besides maybe like Angular and Vue. But of those, it's very, very stable. Lots of people are using it. It's making like React, the React team doesn't want to change React so much. So like larger companies are going to be more likely to stick on React because it's always going to be backwards compatible. So it's just a really safe bet. So once you learn React, if that's the one you choose, then you can go on from there to learn an actual like meta framework, like Next.js, for example, is the most popular, obviously, with React. But you don't even really need to learn a meta framework if you want to get a job. I would say if you learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React, that's probably enough to land yourself a good web development job. The only other thing I would mention is also think about TypeScript. TypeScript is something that like even just 2 years ago, I would have said, you probably don't need to know it. But over the last just couple of years, TypeScript has exploded in popularity. More companies than ever are using it. So I would say after you learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can either go into TypeScript or you can go into React. And then after you finish that, go back to whichever one you didn't learn before.
Yeah, I agree with you. Even for the folks who ask me about front end versus back end, I think HTML, CSS, JavaScript just it's a gateway to understanding how web development works, and then you can work from there your way to the APIs, to the back end, to the databases, and only then you can understand which part of it is that you like more. In the beginning, you might think, "Oh, I don't like creating web apps," or I like to work on databases or on the back end," but once you start doing it, you would find your passion of which part is it that you enjoy more. And nowadays, I think even more and more, the line between the front end and back end is just kind of disappearing. It's like more so like a product engineer, where you just take a product, it needs some UIs, it needs some APIs. If you're working with meta frameworks, as you mentioned, or these popular frameworks, they all expose an API layer for you to write backend code. So you're writing front end and back end all together, and taking care of this product that you're creating more so than individually focusing on the back end. Now, in terms of other languages other than JavaScript, TypeScript that you mentioned, it's becoming necessary these days to know. Is there any other kind of language like Python, Go, Rust that I can see that they have gained some popularity, either because of the data science for Python, or Go and Rust because of their usage in compilers that are even used in the JavaScript kind of world? What do you think about those other types of languages?
Yeah, I would say if you want to learn another language, I would definitely say JavaScript first. Learn that first. It's what the web is built on. You need it if you want to write any front end code at all. But if you want to learn a second language, Python, Go, Rust are all great options. What I would recommend doing is just find a list of what maybe some of the most popular web development related languages are. JavaScript, Python, Go, Rust, those are probably going to be kind of up there. Maybe even C Sharp is going to be up there too. Look at that list. And then what I would recommend doing is just learning the basics of those languages. Once you know JavaScript, learning the absolute basics of another language will take you like a day, just because there's so many things that are similar between them. So learn the absolute basics and build out like a really small just project with each one. Maybe build a to-do list with each one of these languages and realize, okay, what are the differences between these languages? What do I like? What don't I like? And just figure out which language you have the most fun programming in. Because, for example, Rust is a rather difficult programming language, which is quite a bit different than JavaScript. That's a big transition. But going from JavaScript to Python, or even Go in that example, they're very similar languages, so the transition is a lot easier. So I would say just try out the different languages, build something really small, even a hello world application, and just figure out, okay, which do I actually like working in? Once you know which one you actually like working in, you can just start learning that and building other projects in it. But between the different languages like Python, Go, Rust, and so on, they're all really popular for certain things. For example, Rust is really popular for performance related things, building out compilers. C Sharp is really popular in more like enterprise style web applications on the back end. Python's really popular for like data analytics and like AI related stuff. Go is another one popular on the back end. And you can use these things for many different things. Even PHP is super popular if you're into WordPress development. So I don't think there's a wrong choice. I would just recommend finding the one that you enjoy working with the most.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. Now, you mentioned AI there and AI related languages. What is your take on the AI? I've started dabbling into, AI or building applications that are one way or another using a feature from AI, either it's text generation or image generation, or even taking it to the extent where you could use it to build UIs like the V0 SDK that was introduced by Vercel. In folks thinking that our job as front end developers, if we are not kind of learning AI or utilizing our own skills with AI, can be easily replaced with AI. If we are just focused on building UIs, well, probably in a few years that can be just produced with a text prompt. So what is your take on it? And have you dabbled into AI at all?
Yeah, there's almost three different categories of AI in this conversation. There's AI that helps you as a developer build things faster. There's AI that's going to replace you as a developer. And then there's AI that you integrate into the products that you create as a developer. So the very first category I want to talk about is the AI that helps you as a developer. This is things like Copilot or like V0, like you talked about. These are tools that all they do is help you write code faster or design UIs faster. And I think these tools are absolutely amazing. Like I've used Copilot for the last year, absolutely love it on all the projects I work on. It doesn't matter which one you use. You could use Copilot Tab 9. It doesn't matter. Just find some type of AI auto completion. But I wouldn't recommend using these tools when you're very first starting to learn code. But once you've understood the basics of how coding works and you kind of can build projects on your own, these tools just make writing out code faster because they kind of give you the boilerplate code and they make typing out your code faster because it auto completes for you. So that's the first category of stuff. I think it's great. Second category is things that replace your job, AI that's going to take over and completely replace web developers. I don't think this exists. A lot of people are afraid that this is something that's going to happen. Even people I know I've talked to are really afraid of this. I don't think it's something that exists. I mean, think about when Squarespace and Wix came out. A lot of people were afraid that those were going to take all the web development jobs. And what we realized, all that did was just take away some of the web development jobs. We got rid of like the really basic brochure sites for like photographers. They can now use Squarespace. They don't need to hire a web developer. But these AI tools, sure, these new AI tools that are coming out are going to help replace another subset of jobs. They're going to replace maybe some jobs for some more really basic types of sites, but they're not going to replace like Facebook engineers or they're not going to replace the Instagram engineers. There's no AI tool out there right now or even in the near future that is going to replace essentially an entire developer's brain. I think what's going to happen is it's just going to help you as a developer, make you smarter and make you faster, but it's never going to replace you as a developer. And then like the third kind of category here is going to be AI you integrate into your product. And I think really the only important thing to think about here is what problem does AI actually solve? Are you putting it into your product because AI is the next cool thing? Or are you putting it in because it's actually solving a problem? That's really the only thing to think about. If the AI actually solves a problem, use it. But if you're just putting it in there so you can say you have AI in your product, it's probably not worth it.
Yep, I like how you categorize the different applications of AI when it comes to our jobs or our passion as developers there. And I agree with you that I don't think AI is going to replace developers. It's definitely going to shift and shape how we do stuff in future, whether it's using it, helping us to write better code or to write faster code, or maybe even replace some parts of our job. As any technology introduction has done throughout the history, it just shapes and changes the way that we work. Maybe we work on the tools that now use those technologies just like before. And integrating AI into our apps. Again, there are some cool apps that will be helpful, some that are just hype, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool that we can all benefit from. I agree with that. Now we talked about the web dev stuff. I want to acknowledge and mention that I find that whether you're talking about web development or creating a YouTube channel, you're always very helpful. And I have this experience with you as well, where I just recently was added to a group and came in touch with you. And I saw you interacting with other developers on that community and how helpful you are. I would never imagine, somebody that has 1.5 million subscribers to be as helpful as you are. So I want to acknowledge for how humble and helpful you are in, taking the experience that you have and sharing it with others without holding anything back. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it really just goes to my passion. Like I'm really passionate about teaching things. So like if I have the opportunity to teach something to someone that I'm passionate about, like of course I'm going to do it.
Yeah, of course. I admire that. Now, I want to ask you, I see that guitar on the corner of your room
Yep.
all the time in your videos. So
Yep.
what does Kyle do when you're not coding, when you're not creating videos, when you're not developing?
Yeah. So for me, probably my two biggest passions outside of programming is like the gym, weightlifting. I like to ride my bike quite a bit, and then obviously practicing guitar. I actually bought the white guitar that you can see over there. I bought that maybe like 2 weeks before I decided to start my YouTube channel. And I was like, I'm going to learn to play guitar. And then I was like, okay, now I'm starting this YouTube channel. So this guitar thing just like went on the sideline for like 2 years straight. I didn't touch it at all until finally when I quit my full-time job, I was like, okay, now I finally have time to practice guitar again. But like I'm a pretty like big into music. I really like music, mostly metal music. That's kind of like what I listen to, which surprises a lot of people, but it's definitely my preferred genre. So I've always wanted to learn to play guitar. So when I finally got the chance to buy one and actually had the time to actually practice, so I've been practicing probably for the last like 3 years or so pretty consistently. So I quite enjoy
Nice.
it.
Awesome. Yeah. I have that guy over there too. We're different probably in the genres of
Yeah.
the
Yep.
guitar. Yeah, but I like the guitar and I've been playing it for some time now. Not as consistent probably as you do. I do play another instrument which is traditional in Iran. But I have always had the guitar on the side. I play songs that I like. But if I come around and I find time to just do lessons or practice it on a more consistent basis, that would be the first one that I would just take down. In my journey, I'm not as further advanced as you are. You're accomplished in the YouTube, and you're like, okay, now I can take some time off for what I love to do, and hopefully I will get there too sometime to kind of be able to have some free time on the side to do this type of stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. Cause like when I was first starting my YouTube channel, you probably know this pain really well. It was like I was busy 24/7. Like that's when I started getting up early in the morning so I could find extra time to work. And even on the weekends, I would wake up at 5 a.m. and work till like noon. That way I
Yeah,
could get stuff done. And it just
that's
worked
my
out
case
really
now.
well because my wife, my girlfriend at the time, she was in PA school, and PA school was like really, really ruthlessly tough. And it just requires you to be at school full time and then homework full time after that. So like she was super busy and lived like an hour away from me. So I was like, I don't even get a chance to see her during the week. So I might as well just work after work, like just grind out while I can while she's in school, because when she's done with school, I'll obviously want to spend more time with her because we'll both have more time. So it worked
Yeah,
out really well for me.
yeah. I am definitely on those years that you are waking up early, trying to jam pack everything, working harder. How's your schedule right now? Are you still grinding as much, or slowing down a bit?
It goes through
Wait.
phases for me. So like when I'm working on a course, it's pretty heavy in the grind, but I try to set my hours so that as soon as my wife is done with work, I don't work after that. So like she's usually done around 5. So I definitely never work after 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
And I try to
definitely.
try to be done with work around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just because I still get up at 5. So I start my day like 5:30,
Yeah,
6 o'clock in the morning. So I start pretty early. I try to be done by 3 because that gives me time to practice guitar before my wife gets home, and then we can go to the gym when she gets home. It just gives me time to like do my own thing before
Have
she
a
gets home,
life.
whatever it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
have a life, you know. Yep. So I like to get done, and also if it's nice outside, like especially in the winter, it gets dark by like 4:30, 5 o'clock here. So like being done at 3 means you at least have like an hour of light left in the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. You mentioned the courses that you've been working on, and I do want to also mention them here. I know you have great courses, you have great content. You don't need my promotion here, but I do want to ask everyone to check out your courses. I know you have recently introduced a TypeScript course and the NextJs course. We kind of share the passion there for Next.js. So we'll include the links in the description for anyone who wants to check out Kyle's channel or the courses. I really appreciate your time, man, here joining me on this second episode of this podcast series for these interviews. Thank you for the contribution you had to the web dev industry as a whole and in my own journey and probably in a lot of my audience's journey. So I want to acknowledge you for your contributions there and for the time that you put in here sharing your experience with us here.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. I just want to say before this ends that I absolutely love your videos. I know that I first got introduced to your channel while I was working on my Next.js course. You had a ton of Next.js videos that were absolutely amazing. And I was like, wow, this guy's videos are incredible. Like I thought you'd been programming for way longer than you had been because you seemed like really, really knowledgeable and really well educated on everything. So I just want to say your videos are great. I absolutely love them. So everyone watching this should also watch all of your videos as well. And I think you have a Next.js course. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do have
Yes.
an NextJs course
I'd
as well.
recommend
Yeah.
checking that out as well for anyone watching
Okay.
this.
Awesome, man. I appreciate. I'm so flattered hearing that from you and your experience. Thank you very much again for joining me here, and hopefully we'll stay connected. Maybe if we have you on for a second part 2 in future, I don't know,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
thank you very much.
Thank you.